May I ask you why you chose to work in this field?
Sure. So I became a therapist because, well, mental health has definitely been a big theme in my life from childhood. So I've myself been the person sitting in the chair and being in the chair, and being able to give the gift that I was given to have someone in my corner and give real truth and unconditional caring kind of changed my life. So I want to give that back to others.
All right. What is your position at Pacific Shores?
I'm a marriage and family therapist, associate for now.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully licensed soon. But yeah, marriage family therapist, do therapy, individual, group, family, couples, do a little bit of everything.
Can you describe your approach to building rapport with clients?
Sure. The best way I can describe it is, it's going to be such a lame answer, but I don't care. The best way I can describe my approach to clients is that when they come into my room, I literally let them feel like they are the reason that, one, we are there, but for me, therapy is very much a collaborative thing. So I don't want clients to come in my room feeling like I'm the expert. Like, in a way, I am, because this is what I've studied, but ultimately they're the expert on their lives, and I'm the guest who just gets to be there to help them in this brief window that they get to be here. So whether that's 30, 60, 90, if we're lucky 120, I kind of get to be a little bit of the guide that hopefully helps them see life a whole new way that they haven't before.
You said 30, 60, 90, hopefully 120. Is there a time that you think is most beneficial to be in treatment?
I always say the longer the better. And I realize, life happens and there's outside factors, so financial, family, work, whatever it is. But ultimately, it's like anything, is the more time you can put into it, the bigger the change. So clients who come here for 30, they get things out of it, but it's not as much as someone who gets weekly therapy for 120 days versus the person who gets weekly therapy for 30 days. And there's big outcome difference in terms of, and studies have shown this, of those who can and are able to have the longer time, they tend to stay sober longer, they tend to have more coping skills, they tend to have a better outlook on life, and it shows up in their recovery.
What challenges do you face when working with individuals in recovery?
Well, I feel like the biggest one is, so I'm not in recovery myself, and so that's usually a big barrier for clients to trust in me. But I think that when it comes to therapy, the person with you doesn't have to have the exact story. So it helps to have someone outside of what you've lived and experienced in terms of like your substance use or anything like that, to help see something a different way than you have before. But outside of that, I think the biggest is when people can't see the change that they're about to make. So they're wanting, they're willing, but it's like they hold themselves back from being able to see the potential of hope. And rightfully so, people don't come here because they come without hurts, without shame, without guilt. And oftentimes hope has been one of those things where people have held on to it and it's been a disappointment. So for them to come here and start to get a glimpse of that and hold themselves back, it's the hardest thing, but also the most rewarding when they finally come to that conclusion that it's okay to. But yeah, it's kind of the hardest.
How do you measure the success of your treatment strategies?
Ooh, I mean, that's really individualized for me. I don't see everybody the same. I'm not like the cookie cutter therapist where it's like we all follow this exact plan and that's how it goes. So for some clients, it's like being able to have friends. Like a lot of times people come with total isolation, having no idea how to even like walk up to a person and say, hi, like, I'm so-and-so, nice to meet you. And for others, it's being able to go and get a job and not want to leave after the first day. Like, a lot of times it's a lot of the little wins for individuals. So that could be they went to the grocery store and didn't have a panic attack. That could be they have a whole support group. They've started going to AA or NA or Dharma and all these things and aren't panicking every time they enter a room. And it could be as simple as showing up to therapy and being able to open up more than they did the day before. So it's all a matter of perspective. But each of those is a win.
Wow. So when they are working, say, like that social anxiety or whatever that, do you intentionally bring that to their awareness and then check back up and like how to feel?
Of course, yeah. I mean, and that's the hard part is when we're living life, we're so busy in our own heads that we can't see our own wins. So one of my favorite things to do as a therapist is to be like, you realize like even in this moment you're struggling, you're asking for help in a way you wouldn't have 30, 40, 60 days ago. And they're like, what? I'm like, you're asking for support, you're asking for your needs to be met. And most of the time people, before they come to treatment, they don't know how to do that. Or it's never been like attended to. So when they get to do that here and it be heard, like that's a massive win to just advocate for yourself.
What techniques do you use to handle crises or emergencies in treatment settings?
So a lot of techniques I use, one, I tend to bring the client out to just like a one-on-one. When you're in a big group of people, it tends to amplify the situation and it makes the person feel worse usually. So we step to the side, we have a conversation. Honestly, most of the time, you have to let the person get it out of their system. So like, I've been yelled at, I've been cussed at. It doesn't matter because at the end of the day, once they feel heard and seen, which is the biggest crisis technique, and that's not like danger to self and others, but a lot of times being there to support them in their worst moments or in their most struggle is how it tends to de-escalate because a lot of people when they come in here haven't had that. Or it's been treated like it's the worst thing in the world. When we've all had bad moments, and some of us have just been lucky enough to have people there to support us while others haven't. So really identifying, because most of the time when people are in crisis, they're having a need that they either don't know what it is or they know what it is and don't know how to explain it or haven't had the skills to be like, oh, I'm super frustrated because I keep doing the same thing over and over again. And someone be like, oh, it sounds like what you need is a break in the routine because it's feeling monotonous. And they're like, oh, yeah. Just being able to, like, really turn it on its head and be like, I see what you're asking for. And they're like, yeah. So it's a big skill I use.
Yeah. How do you stay updated on best practices and new research in substance abuse treatment?
I love research. I'm a bit of a nerd, so I like looking at research. I spend a lot of time just going through like internet sources, and quite frankly, because I take an individualized approach, a lot of times I'm learning just as much as the clients are learning. So if they present with something where I'm like, you know, let me look into this. Like right now, a big thing is ketamine treatments or psychedelic treatments, and research is so new. So a lot of time I'm spending right now looking into this. Or big thing that people are doing research on is like ultrasounds on substance abuse. So we're seeing new things every day. It's just a matter of being curious, and if you're going to be in this field long term, you got to be able to do a little bit of work outside of just being here and being curious and being like, okay, what's going to work best? Because sometimes old techniques don't work, and that's okay. It just means adapting.
Yeah. How do you incorporate a spiritual orientation into your therapy sessions?
I leave that, again, it's going to be so cheesy, but I leave that to the individual because, I mean, I've had everybody under the sun, from religiosity to spirituality to non-spirituality, and I find that everybody has their own journey with it. And it's not on me to kind of impart my beliefs because that doesn't help them either. So it's really a matter of just helping them assess what they want to explore, what they don't want to explore. If their lack of wanting to explore is tied to things that have happened before or their previous experiences, then that's what we talk about. And oftentimes clients land on their own belief system. simply from just being able to have a conversation with someone who's not going to judge them about what they believe. So I've had the whole spectrum: Mormons, Christians, Catholics, Jehovah Witnesses, atheists. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a matter of what's going to bring them peace in terms of how they celebrate or not celebrate their own spirituality.
What are some common breakthroughs you witness in clients during therapy?
Common breakthroughs. Just playing them all in my head. I think the most common tends to be the realization that they're more than what they've experienced. So a lot of times people come into treatment and they've defined themselves by either the best or the worst things that they have experienced or done. And that's kind of their frame of who they are. And oftentimes, through obviously the hard work they do, they tend to have moments and they become more and more of just like, oh, that wasn't me. Or just because that happened doesn't mean that's who I am. It's them taking the labels off themselves, taking themselves out of that box, and deciding that they can be who they want to be or who they've always meant to be, and just were too afraid or too hurt to be.
How do you tailor your approach for clients with dual diagnosis?
Since that's primarily who we see. So a lot of it is a collaborative effort. So in therapy, we talk a lot about, because I see substance abuse and mental health as the same token, same side of the coin. And I know a lot of places don't necessarily see it that way, or people don't. But oftentimes I see substance abuse as a symptom of what's really going on for mental health. So there's that aspect. But because I work with a lovely team, we often counsel in like their case manager. We talk to the psychiatrist. We work collaboratively because I'm still human and I might miss a piece and they might miss a piece. And while I'm not telling them all the therapy things, I'm saying, oh, we're working on this issue. And they go, oh, I'm working on this issue. And they're telling me this. I'm like, oh, I didn't even realize, because oftentimes we just share different information and it helps bring it together.
How do you involve families in the treatment process?
So I love when families are involved. So I often ask in the first or second or third, depends on clients' willingness, how they want their families to be involved. So ideally, I would have every single client doing family therapy, because clients as a whole tend to do better when they have the support of their family members. So we'll do family sessions. Oftentimes we'll practice communication skills. It's a whole other aspect of therapy that the clients who participate in the family therapy tend to do a lot better, because they're able to let go of some of the resentments, the hurts, or even set boundaries and find power in ways they didn't realize they had, or clarity that oftentimes we can miss when we're just doing individual therapy. And so when clients allow me to have family involved, I absolutely adore it, because the family often adds insight that I don't get to see, or they add a piece that maybe the client didn't get to see because of their mental health or their substance abuse. It adds another dynamic, another layer that leads to a better holistic approach.
What advice do you give to families of individuals in recovery?
I think the best advice I can give is love unconditionally, but be prepared to set boundaries, because unconditional love doesn't come without boundaries. But knowing that the person who's going through it is oftentimes doing the best they can with what's going on with them. So it's hard, because substance abuse isn't just about the individual who's coming to treatment. Ultimately, addiction affects everybody who they're in touch with, not just the person who's directly experiencing it. And so it takes a lot of empathy on all sides to understand that this disease kind of doesn't care who it takes. And it takes family members along, even if they're not using, because their loved one is going through it. And when you love someone, you can't help but care and show up. And so, I mean, they're doing the best with what they're given, and ultimately the families are as well. I mean, that's why people seek help, is because they don't know what else to do.
How can families best support their loved ones during treatment?
I mean, it's just about, I'm sure there's lots of answers, but I find that the best way is just to be honest and kind and present when you can. And that's really all you can ask for, because things come and go with relationships. There's good times, there's bad times, but oftentimes when someone comes to treatment, they've hit their lowest point. And really what they need most from their family is just to know that they're there. And that doesn't mean necessarily giving them the world, but it just means being able to have an honest, kind conversation, and or just say, I don't know what you're going through, but I care about you. And that makes the biggest difference for a lot of people, especially when they're first starting out in treatment.
What resources do you recommend for family members seeking to understand addiction better?
Al-Anon is a big one that I always recommend. That way they can also experience the program that oftentimes their family member is going through. But because I'm a therapist, I usually also recommend doing individual therapy, because, again, this disease touches everybody and nobody kind of walks out of it unscathed. And so being able to have someone outside of, your loved one going through this, to have someone to be there and to understand and to guide you, really gives you the option to show up better for yourself and ultimately your loved one. And then the last one is, our family program is pretty good, so I highly recommend it.
Awesome. All right, and these are a couple that aren't on here, but is addiction a disease?
Yeah, definitely.
And why?
Why? Because it affects the brain in such a way that it never reverts back to the way it is. I mean, they've had so many studies done where you can heal your brain, but it never goes back to, I can just simply have a sip of alcohol again, or I can smoke a cigarette again. It's one of those things where once that window is open, you can't close it. It's a matter of diligently working on it, managing it. It's about taking the daily steps to take care of yourself and it to be more proactive about it, because I've seen it time and time again where people are like, I'm cured, and then they're back in treatment because they stopped doing the things that manage their disease. Because the pathways in our brain, while they can change and be molded, it will always be a super highway.
So, have you ever seen someone that was addicted to opiates that was able to go out and eventually have a cocktail or anything like that over time? Have you ever seen that?
Yeah. And that's the thing about addiction too. It's not cookie cutter itself, but I find it's rare.
So do you see some people suffer with struggling with addiction more than others? Or
No, I don't see it that way. I see it as like, thank you. I see it as, it's not struggling more than others, because the comparison game is dangerous. Addiction is addiction regardless. I find that people who can come here and maybe they got it on the tail end of abuse right before it's crossing into addiction. And so while they were abusing their prescription drugs or starting to abuse alcohol, then, I mean, some people can smoke weed and be fine. I find rarely that works. But I never say an absolute, because absolutes don't really exist.
Okay. One more question here. So,
Sure.
after someone leaves treatment, what is the biggest suggestion that you give someone that graduates a successful treatment and does the work?
Yeah.
What is the biggest thing that they can do to stay sober when they leave? Or biggest things?
I think it's continuing to focus on what has worked. So for a lot of clients, they say, I'll be in therapy forever. I'm like, well, maybe you don't have to be in forever, but going to therapy once a month to be like, checking in, this is what's going on in my life. It's continuing to work the program they're working. And maybe it's not going twice a day anymore because they don't need that, but it's a matter of showing up once a week or whatever it is, because it's continuing to do the things that work. When people stop doing the things that have worked for them, stop repeating the pattern that they've put in their brain, it opens up that window again.
I got actually another one that came through. All right. So you work with a lot of people that are healing and pouring out a lot of emotion and energy. How do you take care of yourself as a therapist working with so many individuals?
So while this job has an emotional toll, it also refills my cup in a lot of ways. But when I have those hard days, because I'm human and because therapists hold space and hold a lot of big emotions for a lot of people, I often find that I rely on my resources. So you'll be known to see me sometimes in the backyard eating lunch with my coworkers just to decompress and talk about random things. Making fun of people of their poor movie choices, I don't know. But a lot of times for me it's going home and seeing my niece, or she's a little baby, she's adorable, being around the people who have filled my cup just as much as I filled their cup. So I'm not an introvert, I'm more of an extrovert, so oftentimes my self-care isn't me being by myself, it's being surrounded by the people who give me more life.
Nailed it. All right, well, that's a wrap.
Cool, awesome, I'm actually sweating a little bit.